Guten Morgen, good morning. Üdvözlök mindenkit, to everybody. Very warm welcome to this cooperation of the Collegium Hungaricum and Translationale Berlin. We're very pleased to have this really exciting event about translation of a slightly different kind. So it's also about translation between languages, between Hungarian and English. But it's more than this, it's also about translating experiences that are really difficult for us to grasp as human beings with a limited sort of horizon of perception. The event is about this very interesting book, an encyclopedia about climate change. The panel will explain exactly what this involves, but it's very much about how can we translate these facts and the kind of scale of what is happening to us in the world in a way that people can perceive through art and poetry and science, I guess. I just want to introduce our presenter, Birgit Schneider. Birgit Schneider is a cultural and media scientist, and she teaches as a professor at the University of Potsdam. Her work focuses on images and ways of perceiving the climate between science, politics, art, and the media, communication of climate change, images of ecology, and questions of natural aesthetics. Her monograph Klimabilder, eine Genealogie globaler Bildpolitiken von Klima und Klimawandel, so images of climate and climate change, was published in 2018. And her book, Der Anfang einer neuen Welt, The Beginning of a New World, How We Tell Ourselves About Climate Change Without Falling Silent, in 2023. A very warm welcome to Birgit, who will introduce our panel. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us here. I'm still struggling a little bit with the microphone, so I hope this works well. Yes. No. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for coming here to follow the discussion. I will briefly introduce the three guests we have here who were all involved in the extrodæsia encyclopedia, which we will learn a lot about in the next 75 or so minutes. Rita Süveges is a visual artist based in Budapest, and her interdisciplinary research-based practice is twofold. Either she is in community knowledge sharing projects, or she's going to museums and to white cubes and doing installative shows and artworks. These artworks deal with a lot of topics like mining, extractivism, petroculture, mobility and motor power, for example, from a feminist critique of techno-scientific imaginaries point of view. And she has had a lot of shows in many cities, in Paris, New York, Prague, Vienna, and she's also enrolled as a PhD candidate. And she is a co-founder of the xtro realm artist group. We will learn about them too, because they play an important role in the publication of the book, and she is also the editor and an author of the extrodæsia book we are discussing today. Anna Zilahi is a poet and a transmedia artist. She's working a lot in participatory ways with text and sound-based works, and she also focuses on questions of ecology, feminism, and society and politics. She graduated at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna in 2021, and she's also a co-founder of the Budapest-based xtro realm artist group, actually whose work address also topics of non-anthropocentric and ecological strands of thought since already 5 or 6 years. 2017 this group was founded. And then we have Owen Good here, who is from Northern Ireland originally and is a translator in Hungarian poetry and prose. He has a major in Hungarian studies, and he actually is the person who translated the book, which is bilingual, from Hungarian into English. And we will talk about this also in detail today. He edits at Hungarian Literature Online and the Continental Literary Magazine. And I think you're one of the major translators of Hungarian prose and poetry and books. His most recent book's translation is, and now I hope that I can spell this name rightly, Zolt Langs, a surreal collection of short stories, The Birth of Emma K. I'm really happy of having you here, and I would like to get into the discussion now by maybe for the very beginning. Maybe you can also could also circulate a book if you are happy to have a yeah. There's one in the audience. This book was actually, you started this in 2017 and it was published in 2019. And I would like to know a little bit for the beginning, how did the initial idea evolve to do this book, and what does the title mean to you?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. So with Gideon and Rita, we started to work together in 2017. And that time I was studying in Vienna, where the topics of ecology, climate change, and the Anthropocene were kind of already critiqued, and even the critique of these were critiqued. And when we looked at the Hungarian scene, we realized that this discourse was actually missing, which was a big lack of discourse, especially if you take into account that we wanted a discourse around our works and around our topics. So that's why we started to select texts and organize reading sessions within the art scene and the literary scene. We invited theoretic people, lecturers, to lead these reading sessions. And after a while, after a year or so, we realized that the notions that we are bringing in from different languages, most specifically from English, we started to use these notions in our lives and in our works, and we figured out that it would be nice to put it into a collection of entries. We were thinking about the dictionary, actually, not an encyclopedia. But then, of course, it's an interesting question: why encyclopedia and why not a dictionary? But the extra realm itself, and this is where the title comes from a text from Quentin Meillassoux, French philosopher, who's one of the main figures of speculative realism and new materialist philosophies. And there's one text by him titled Science Fiction and Extro Science Fiction, which ponders the possibility of a science fiction, of a fiction beyond the modernist vision of science. So beyond what we know about science, beyond the rules of science, beyond this modernist discourse. And we also wanted to name ourselves after that, because we wanted to go beyond the anthropocentric way of looking at the world, and wanted to create a new realm for ourselves and for our colleagues to think in new ways. So that's where extra realm comes from, and extrodæsia comes from extra science fiction, and from geodæsia, which is basically the science of measuring the specific parts of the Earth. So we wanted to measure the world which transcends these anthropocentric approaches.
So one could say the glossary, the terms, they are helping to build a map of how to do this, yeah?
Yes, yes.
And now we are looking at this image which shows you discussing. So what was the language in these moments? Because now I understand that you read mostly English texts, but how did you discuss them, yeah?
Yes, we read also English texts, also texts translated to Hungarian. For example, I think what we are witnessing here is a Bruno Latour group session, and these were already translated to Hungarian. There were texts that we spread out in English. There were also texts that I personally raw translated. So we tried to facilitate these discussions in Hungarian, but sometimes it was just not easy. But of course, there's already a question of accessibility when the texts are in a foreign language.
And I would also like to know, because you were also involved in the process of designing the book, how this collaboration went on, and how the collaboration worked on all these levels. Because the book, it has a lot of images also, and it has a very special design. I don't know if we can see some pages later on.
Yeah.
But maybe you want to...
Yeah, maybe go back. So, hi, welcome. So I joined the group through an exhibition that they organized and in 2017, and they were accompanied by these reading groups. And since I was dealing with these topics for a long time, and I was also looking for partners or like a community to have a group discussion of topics around and theories around the climate crisis and the Anthropocene and all these things. And it was difficult. And also the visual art scene at that point in Hungary was not really receptive for these thoughts. So let me just tell a short story. I started this PhD, which is actually a Doctor of Liberal Arts program, in 2014. And my colleague, who was this young woman artist, had a work about trees. She was introducing her work about trees. It was a very beautiful conceptual work. And the professor, this older male professor in the room, asked, do you like trees? And so she was considered as someone who's like this tree hugger, you know. And so this is how, like, if you were not dealing with, as an artist, you were not dealing with topics of the society or the human psyche or whatsoever, then you were this girl who's a tree hugger. But let me tell you, actually, tree hugging was a very serious political act in India. That's how it started. So this guy was actually making a joke of himself. But so I was looking for partners, a companionship to be able to talk about these topics, and I found it in the xtro group. So I joined the process. It was mostly Anna who curated the literature part of the book and the authors, and I somehow took over the design. So as you were mentioning map, we thought that we are having all these notions, and which are not necessary. It's not like a path. It's not like a path that you build. Oh. It's not like a path that you build upon like one step and then the next step is coming. So we thought that it's more like a terrain or like a space with all these notions, creating networks with each other. So that's how it was kind of obvious to create some kind of a visual map around it. And we have some, I don't know if I should go there. So this is the table of contents of the book, which is already a terrain. I don't know, should I say more at this point or maybe later?
We can come back to it.
Yeah.
So as you can see, there are 70 terms in the book. No, is it 70 or is it page 70?
Page 70.
How many terms do you have in the book?
Oh.
Just an estimate.
I forgot this number.
Yeah, me too.
I'm sorry.
But at least 50, 80, I don't know. A lot
there
of terms?
must be around maybe 50 in
50,
there, so
yeah.
I would say, yeah.
And we will, maybe now it's time to really get into the text, because you chose some text to read them in both language, because this is a bilingual encyclopedia, and then I would like to follow up on the question, what is the difference between a dictionary, a glossary, and an encyclopedia, and why did you choose for the last one?
Absolutely. I will read the English. Shall I read the Hungarian as well? Anna, what do you think? Shall I read the Hungarian as well? Hungarian is not my first language, so
yeah,
I will
Yes.
do my best, but perhaps it works for this book, for me to read the Hungarian.
Yeah.
Cautio. Those who work with metal resemble metal. Metals hold the power over bodies. Those who work with stone resemble stone. Stones hold things of the past. Yet if you do not want power but momentum, you desire not what's been but what's to come, then work with flexible materials, as these are embodiments not of mineral but organic strength. Those who take the cautio path, then, do it for the pleasure of flexibility, for the bounce and for the storage of energy, for the momentum not wasted, for the hands which clapped on the cautio for the first time, for the hands which come to resemble the cautio, for the hands which first began to play with it, for the tree which can't, and for the grievers comforted by the game. Kausuk. Aki fémmel gyakorol, fémhez lesz hasonló. A fémek a testek feletti hatalmat hordozák. Aki kővel gyakorol, kőhöz lesz hasonló. A kövek a múltbelieket őrzik. De aki nem hatalmat akar, hanem lendületet, nem az egykoriakat, hanem a majdaniakat áhítja, rugalmas anyagokkal gyakoroljon. Mert azok nem az ásványi, hanem az organikus erő megtestesülései. Aki tehát a kaucsuk ösvényére lép, a rugalmasság öröméért tegye, a visszapattanásért és az energia megmaradásért, a lendületért, ami nem vész kárba, a kezekért, amik először csapoltak kaucsukot, a kezekért, amik hasonlóvá válnak a kaucsukhoz, a kezekért, amik először kezdtek játszani vele, a fáért, ami nem játszhat vele, és a sírókért, akiket a játék megvigasztal.
Thank you. So the book, the experience of reading the encyclopedia is really special, because when you start reading, the first term is actor, actant in English, agency, age of asymmetry, Amerindian perspectivism. And if you read the entries, you make the experience of very different voices and very different sorts of texts, which normally isn't the case if you're reading a dictionary. Or even, well, and so I would maybe in the first place like to ask also about the term cautio, which is a very special term. If you look it up, you won't find it in any English dictionary. How did you end up with this term? And also the idea of the encyclopedia, what does it open up for you in contrary to other ways of talking about concepts and terms?
So if you look at the table of contents, you can see that there are 50-ish entries, and these are, on the one hand, theoretical texts, but also we invited 6 poets to contribute with 5 texts each. So when one opens the book, might not realize that there are theoretical and poetic texts mixed with each other, also because it's only the table of contents where we show who wrote what. But when you read the book, we didn't actually point out the authors, because we really wanted to focus on the dialogue between the different entries and the dialogue of the 2 different media, which is theory and poetry. So Caucho itself was a poetic entry written by Mátyás Sirokai. And the way we invited these authors was that we realized that there's this discourse going on in English language, but this kind of poetic thinking is present in Hungarian poetry. And on the one hand, it's a little bit like self-colonizing to bring in notions and discourses from a different culture, but we wanted to put it into a dialogue because we felt that it's contrasting this, or compensating this kind of self-colonization with these notions, and we wanted to add our own notions and add our own knowledge to the discourse. That's why also translation became so important, because we invited these poets to resonate on the texts and notions and this whole discourse with their own poetic contributions. And we wanted to translate them back to English. So it's not just, this dialogue doesn't only happen in Hungarian, but it's also brought back to English language. And
so the term caucho is an Hungarian term in the first place? Or the concept of caucho?
The caucho was a concept of Mátyás Sirokai, and this is the title of his poem, basically. So yes, so it's a poetic entry, and that's why we brought it to English.
And you as a translator, how was your experience in the process? Did you work with, when did you enter the project, and what did it mean to translate these texts?
I entered the project later on then, when the concept of the book had already come together and the pieces were being written. I think that's when I came in on the project. And in fact, I didn't translate all of the texts, but I translated the poetic texts in the book. So I had only, which made it again an interesting process, because I had an idea of what the poetic section of the book looked like, but I didn't have any idea of what the rest of it was. And so when to see the book then, to receive the book and actually see the object, was really exciting, to see all this terrain that lies around the poetic entries, and the visual of it as well. In terms of the translating part, it was these literary entries in the book I really see as opportunities for some sort of transcendence, really. There's a lot of explanation in the theoretical entries. I see that we are trying to pin things down and try to clarify things, logically speaking, perhaps, But in the poetic entries, there seems to be an opportunity for these to be given some sort of ability to transcend, to leap off, and those texts that are hidden in there amongst the more theoretical entries are little windows that you can escape through. And it was very enjoyable to work on in translation as well, because I had to bear this in mind, I suppose, not to be too concrete with my terminology, I suppose, to allow space for there to be some loose interpretation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Well, encyclopedia. So what does this way to organize concepts, terms, words, what did it mean to you, and what limits did it set? Yeah, why did you choose to do it this way? Yeah.
So we were having, I think, this discussion with Mário Z. Nemes, one of the poets, and he mentioned the encyclopedia by Georges Bataille, and we really resonated this idea of like bringing together these notions, but we wanted to make a dictionary because we felt that maybe it's more humble to make a dictionary than an encyclopedia, and big notion of the Enlightenment. And actually, as far as I remember, we called it dictionary for most of the time, and then we asked Marc Lochont, a philosopher based in Serbia, to write the introductory text to the book, and he called this project an encyclopedic
endeavor.
And that's what we haven't found the text, the title of the book that time, and then we realized, okay, yes, this is actually an encyclopedia, not a dictionary, because of how it works. But we were also, I think, not fine with, just how megalomaniac encyclopedia sounds. And then, like, in a review later, one of our reviewers wrote that this is an anti-encyclopedia, and I think that's when we actually figured out what it was. So what encyclopedia embodies, like this whole body of knowledge about the world, which can be collected and presented in a framework of a closed work. It was exactly what we wanted to oppose in an open project where also terms contradict one another, and also there are different genres like theory and poetry and visual entries, and even the fact that we had to create the notions in Hungarian which didn't exist before. So it was an open concept, and we went with it.
Which terms were not translatable, or which terms did you have to invent in Hungarian? Or the other way around, maybe.
I remember this one case. We were writing. Our group was writing the entry about Donna Haraway's kinship, notion of kinship, and I remember that we didn't really have a word in Hungarian for making kin. It was. I don't know, it was in Hungary, the Hungarian language is really broad. You can find a word I mean, it's your expertise, but it's really a broad way to translate things, but I thought that we need to invent a new term for this, and that's how we did rokonulás, and that's her slogan is making kin, not babies, and I somehow, in a group discussion, I came out with rokonuljatok, ne szüljetek, and it was just really interesting to see this term, to hear this term later on in discussions about this topic. So we had to invent some of the terms, and then they kind of rooted into the discourse, which was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we can hear another entry, which also explains a little bit what does it mean to make keen. One of the theoretical entries, forgotten organ paradox, or is it a theoretical entry?
That one isn't. That one isn't.
But maybe now we listen to one of the theoretical entries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, if we're talking about kinship, perhaps I can read that one. Kinship. Donna Haraway, in her Staying with the Trouble, Making Kin in the Cthulhu book, defines kinship as a non-genealogical linkage that is based on responsibility and becoming with, and thus goes beyond the relations between humans. A central question of the book is how to focus on trouble as opposed to self-fulfilling apocalyptic visions. Every thread of our existence is woven into the process web that we need to reshape. Haraway envisions the Cthulhu scene as a future epoch in which human and non-human refugees unite amidst the environmental catastrophe. According to her, historically, regulating population led to such biopolitical conditions that ignored women's and their families' welfare. If estimates are true, then the Earth will have 11 billion inhabitants by the end of the 21st century. We can be as environmentally conscious as possible. Nonetheless, we cannot enact substantial change. Haraway's answer to this is compressed into a slogan: make kin, not babies. The slogan is interfused with feminism, and as Haraway described in the work mentioned above, if there is to be multi-species eco-justice, which can also embrace diverse human people, it is high time that feminists exercise leadership in imagination, theory, and action to unravel the ties of both genealogy and kin and species. Redefining the notion of kinship establishes that all earthlings are all related to one another, and it is time that we cared for kinds as assemblages, not species one at a time, as a community.
Yeah, thank you. As I said, the Encyclopedia is also a way of mapping terms which help you to really make sense of the world we are living now in. So this is how I understand your collection of terms. They are terms which also help artists to work with this in this world, and we will talk about the aesthetic consequences of this in a minute. But I really understand it also like a help book, or maybe a book that helps you to, a toolbox maybe, of concepts which help you to understand, make sense of this crazy ecological crisis world we are in. And yeah, maybe we can, I would like to ask now, Rita, how you translated these concepts, if it is translation at all, when you worked on the images, because I think also the Cautio text already introduces some concepts which might be artistic, materials and how to think about material, but I could also read that the notion of the vicious, the sticky, and the slow is very important for the mediating through also art of all these contexts.
Sorry, it's the perfect moment. Yeah, so my idea was that we should create a terrain with which should actually be a planet. So we created an object of which has 6 sides. It's like an algometric object with 6 different sides with 6 different terrains. So there are some. I created this in CGI because at that time I was learning CGI, and I felt that this is a great tool for like mapping this this world, which is part imaginary, part existing. So I used fragments from the real world, which are sorry. So this is a poster I made from this, from the planet put into 2D, and so there are some terrains which are actually existing terrains from Mexican volcanoes and the mountains of high Tatras and the nuclear crates in the Nevada desert. You can find these data. The actual data of the terrain online, and I used those to create this planet thingy, and I use it as a site for these kind of virtual art installations that I created. For example, this is one which kind of resembles the poem that Owen read, the Caucho, with the hand becoming Caucho, also becoming landscape in the book. But I didn't use the text as close references. We had Gideon also took part in this project, our third participant in the group. So we had a lot of discussions, and I used yeah, so this is, for example, a hybrid plant. I didn't, so I made up new entries through the visuals. So this is a hybrid plant which is made out of very different species. And there's something which, yes. It was somehow, I also find important that how the typography looks in the book, so it goes through the whole design. So I didn't want to keep the texts as like blocks as usually, but I created these kind of fragments from them. So they also somehow they look like they are pieces of puzzle, but there's not really a big thing you can make out of them. They don't create one whole thing. This is also something which talks about how the encyclopedia is something which is a reference point for us that we want to get distance from.
Yeah, this is interesting to know that these are the design of the text is pieces of puzzles, as you said, which will never build a whole, because the notion of encyclopedia is always to give the idea of the whole world, but this is something you are contradicting, of course, with your book. And I also understood that the images are entries for themselves. Yeah.
Yes, and now I started to be because it was a process of this 3D designing, and we also made a video that is kind of an extension of the book in ways, and it also actually has a sound with readings of the poems and such, which now I muted.
Because this is also something we are talking a lot, and it's a lot about language, but thinking through artistic means. I think this is something that the two of you know, that this is also a way of doing philosophy, working with concepts. They do not necessarily have to go through language in the first place, but it can also be the other way around, which really contradicts the idea of a text-based glossary in a way. And I really like how you introduce this other ways of knowledge productions which do not go through language, but through other media, that they also find their place in the book. And I think this is also why poetry is so important, because this is, as you said, it's a very different way of thinking, and not precising, not nailing down concepts, not defining, but not closing down states of knowledge, but opening up into realms of knowledge which actually cannot be brought down to one concept. The alphabetic order, I was just thinking, yes, language is very rigid, but you have two languages, and the alphabet, the Hungarian alphabet, is a different one to the English alphabet. But why did you choose? You could also have mixed it up, not following the alphabet. Why did you choose the alphabet as an order for the concepts?
Can I jump back with just one thought to what you just said? So I think because we are talking about the climate crisis and ecological crisis, and you mentioned how important it is to bring in different knowledges. And this is exactly what we experienced when we were working with these topics in the art scene, and why we thought that it's important to deal with these topics as artists in different media is the fact that climate change and the experience of what is going on around us is really opposing the cognitive way of actually grasping of or comprehending what's going on with the use of language. So we're talking about it, but we are still not understanding it. And we wanted to opt for a bodily understanding and a more sensuous understanding. And I think this is why Rita's contribution and the visual entries are so important, and also the poetic, because it just, even though it's language, it's not theoretical language, but something that affects our body. And that's why we really wanted to bring in poetry and bring in visuals to really spread the knowledge that what's going on around us is something we have to address and we have to tackle. And regarding the alphabet, I think it still comes from the idea of the dictionary. So we really started out planning a dictionary, and at the end, what blew it up was just the way how we worked with poets and Rita's entries and the typography, which actually looks as a topography. So it really started out as a dictionary, and we wanted to have a certain framework. So I think it was easier to point at it as an encyclopedia, to have a genre, or to have a conceptual framework as an encyclopedia or dictionary, and follow its rules, how it's built up, and afterward deconstruct it with different gestures. Then from selecting notions and finding a new way of bringing these notions together. So I think it was a helping gesture.
So what you just said about also the limits of language and also the limits of thought, which challenge, which also the climate change, ecological crisis, and many other crises provokes us to move beyond a lot of orders we have taken for granted, and which are actually also materialized in language. Like a lot of your entries, they try to get rid of the anthropocentric perspective. You have an entry like animal gaze, for example, and what it means to take the perspective away from the human, and to take the perspective of different creatures. But also a lot of dichotomies, like the dualisms, which are so important for modern cultures, like nature and culture, for example. With your entries, you also give the idea of breaking down these logics. And so we could also ask how actually language limits the ways, or at least influences very much the ways we make sense of this world, and we can make sense of this world, and how to get beyond this through language or through inventing new terms, but also to working with materials. And this is something which I very much find in your book, this reworking, unlearning idea of seeing that language is so much limiting thinking. And we were just, when we were discussing before the event, we were also discussing the limits of the English language and the ontology of the English language, because every climate summit, people talk English, and you won't be nobody will listen to you if you're not able to talk English. And this is of course true for so many societies which do not have English as their first language, maybe not even learned. A lot of important people didn't learn, who want to speak up, who need to speak up about the issues, didn't learn English at school. So did you discuss also I call it the English ontology in your project?
Let me jump in right now. So, yeah. Because I just recognized that we have a picture of this face behind us on the poster, which is Mladen Miljanovic. He's a Serbian artist, and who made a lot of self-reflective art from Yugoslavia in the 70s, 80s. And he has a work where he says that an artist who doesn't speak English is not an artist. And so this could be said for our discourse as well, or the climate discourse. And yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's...
We want to actually...
No, I just want to say, to add on to that the English, working in English is very, especially in these poetic pieces, was an interesting challenge, because in theoretical language, the English is very removed from the physical world, because the words that we are using are often Latin-based or perhaps Greek-based, and so it's very removed from our understanding of the physical world. A lot of these poems then take us back to physical materials and very much embody the project again.
That's interesting. We have to listen to more of the entries, I think. Maybe you want to read two?
Okay,
now?
Okay, absolutely. Soil. To plant a tree, put down roots, supple and warm, stiff and cold, bearing onward. The excess drops off, across water, across stone, above earth, below earth. In your every pose you stretch into midway materials, learning evasion, to restlessly recognize traps until arrival. We add water from ourselves to make our lawns more beautiful. The garden receives us softly. We hoe ceaselessly. We sow the beds for ourselves. In gloves we wrestle with our own earth. We prepare our dirt volume. We soften it. We harden. Our air separates from our crust. From without, our fluids, water, earth, pregnant with us. We pelt each other with the clods. On the mound we answer back, and we carry on spreading manure of our own selves. We are the nutrients, the ripening, the arrival. If we reach perfect receptibility, we arrive as the correct capsule dosage. Earth will border us on all sides. From our minerals, a new nautilus will form. Animal gaze. It falls beyond fiction. It gives them nothing. Its gaze roves, skips, scours. The narration stalls. A situation terror starts. The animal is devouring the drama whole. But there'll be no sacrifice. This time, not a single lamb is torn to shreds. Because man and angel both play to it. In a jolly town, it's the third. It bites through imagination. Like ball lightning, it runs out of time. It lolls in the present, radical, unspoiled.
Thank you. I was just thinking, when you said that the poems, they are much more rooted in bodily experience and concrete experience, and of course this is also we know when we are talking about the ecological crisis, it's a lot. Many people say we know everything, but we do not follow what we know, and knowing is a very abstract thing to do. So it's also about bringing in experiences which are very bodily and also very situated experiences in the discussions and in the discourse, because I think science has a lot to offer to let us know, like, what is the crisis about, but we also we have to, in a way, one foot has to be in the abstract realm and the other one in the very concrete realm in order to make sense of climate change and ecological crisis. Yeah. And it's interesting that this is mirrored in the translations, but also in the poets and the theoretical texts.
Yeah, we had later on we did some other projects which were going with this idea of more like we define more the goal of working with the imaginary realm, but I think it also happens in this book because we thought that it's not just about knowing, having the knowledge and the data, but somehow we are not capable of imagining new things or things differently. So that's how we need to work with the imaginary as well, and that's why we wanted to democratize these knowledges with the theory and poetry and the visuals.
So how is the book? How was it? How is it spreading the word? Who reads it in Hungary or maybe also in other countries? What is your experience? Because it's out now for a couple of years. How is it used?
I think in Hungary it was well received. There are, I heard of like university lecturers who teach it at courses, but also I think when we go back and talk to students, I have the impression that people started to use certain ideas and concepts, and also when we look at art shows, we see these notions circulating, which is it feels very good, because we wanted to start a conversation. This was our goal, basically, and this is exactly what we wanted. So, of course, all the time when you bring in something new, there's going to be a certain extent of misunderstanding or non-understanding or opposition of why we need this at all, which is completely fine, because we can talk about that too. But yeah, my experience was that it's still being read, it's still being mentioned.
Yeah, like last time I heard from architects who their topic is similar to ours with they are trying to go for sustainable goals, and which is very difficult in architecture. And and they were using the book as an inspiration when it came out. They didn't know where to look for. They had some ideas. They didn't know where to look for, how to go forward. And the book came out, and that was just some kind of a handbook for them to find paths that their ideas had. So we have these feedbacks from time to time, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm. Good.
One thing, sorry.
Can I just ask, have you heard the terms being used in the wild? Have you heard them in discussions? Have you heard your created terms being used?
One time a museum stole one of our entries for the glossary they were making, which was not the best way to like return to them, but I don't know.
I think there were notions which had an impact, like flat ontology, and I think speculative realism and just generally speculation and the adjective of speculative became a big boom. I don't say that we started it, but we really added to this boom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's space to open up for 1 or 2 questions from the public, or if the format of this recording and streaming does allow it. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything you would like to ask to the panelists? I cannot see any, but if you're raising your hands, I will be aware of it. Is there anything we didn't discuss and would you like to bring up at the end of this session before maybe we can hear a final entry? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that maybe we didn't mention it enough, that our goal was this kind of transdisciplinary thinking and putting discourses in the same spot and kind of mixing them, and this is somewhat the translation between languages. It's a translation between media and translation between knowledge and imaginary. So that's how, maybe just to emphasize that that we could also like frame these ideas in the root of the festival, which is translation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and maybe just one more idea to add to Rita's point is that translation is always collaboration between at least one author and one co-author, which is the translator. And this is a very strongly collaborative work with 16 collaborators. And this is so important for us because we think that the only way to tackle, or not tackle, but fight climate crisis is in collaboration with one another and with even non-human beings. So I think, yeah, that's my last word.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to say that I'm intentionally not stating the authors' names when I am reading, because that is the effect of the book, that the names of the authors are not stated above each entry, but the writers of the literary entries you can see above us. The literary entries are written by Deres Cornélia, Kele Fodorákos, Nemesszé Mário, Sirokai Mátyás, Tóth Kinga, and Zilahi Anna. And maybe then I'll read one more. You mentioned this one that sits between kind of literary and theoretic, which is the forgotten organ paradox, or gut flora paradox. There are more than my own cells, and the number of their genes is 100 times my own. They carry out metabolism similar to the workings of my organs. They perform a part of my digestion. They are the forgotten organ. When I say our digestion, I ought to imply their digestion too. You think of your intestine as completely internal, not as surface. But you don't consider the trillions of bacteria as part of the self. Just like you imagine diseases are something come from the outside, when infections most often come from your own body. But the pharyngeal mucosa that bears the bacteria is part of my exterior. The open cavities of my organ systems are my boundaries, not my contents. This is the dual paradox. There is more life, beings, and information on my surface than inside me. But my surfaces are somehow inside me. And all that life in me isn't mine, it lives outside me. We are inside me, multiplied, packed into each other.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is a perfect ending to take this thinking thought to lunch now. It's about feeding them, not us only.
If nobody else has a question, could I still ask one? Because I love this idea of these kind of slightly unconventional concepts, or the combination of concepts that we know and then concepts that, are just invented. And I'm just curious about the three of you, because you know the book quite well. What are the concepts for you that were kind of the most surprising or most important to you personally? So maybe you could just briefly tell us, and why, and why you think they are important. Thanks. Did you understand the question? Sorry.
Yeah. Maybe I can start. So one of my favorite concepts is not a theoretical entry; it's a poetic entry. It's from Ákos Kelefodor, who Owen was just reading another entry from, and I think it's called Material Cycles, Flow of Materials, and this is somewhat about like the flow of materials between psyches of beings and also bodies of beings. So this somehow, in a very beautifully poetic way, extends the idea of material.
I also love this entry. In Hungarian, there's a play with anya, which is mother, and anyag, which is material, and I think it's a very moving entry. And personally, I learned a lot from kinship. And as an artist, I work with ecofeminist approaches, and for me, kinship was very formative. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So now it's for us to thank you for making this book and giving it to the world. And if anybody's interested here, I know that you have a couple of books with you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us here in this beautiful place, and I wish you a good conference. Thank you.
Thank you.